All right, awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to our elevating conversation tonight. I'm super excited to have a wonderful, illustrious, I'm going to call her a badass, guest from the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Foundation. Just really quickly, I want to introduce myself. My name is Makita Matthews. I am the National Network Director for the Black Career Women's Network. I am also our Literary Circle host, which is where these elevating conversations really stemmed from. I'll let Sherry introduce herself really quickly, and then I will introduce Pam.
Hi, my name is Sherry Sims. I'm the founder of Black Career Women's Network. Black Career Women's Network is an organization that supports the professional development of Black women, and our goal really is to bridge the gap of professional development and mentor access for Black women. So we're really excited about this conversation tonight. Glad you all are here, and I'll go ahead and give it back to Makita.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much. So Pamela Nanga Nge is the digital content lead at the Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Foundation. She drives content development and strategic consulting on the different programs. She has previously supported internal and external communication efforts across the organization's two initiatives, Lean In, which I know many of you have heard of, as well as Option B. Pamela has a passion for empowering communities as reflected in her previous professional experience, which spans in social impact consulting, public policy, gender research, and journalism. Pamela has a BA in communications and political science from the University of California, Davis. Welcome, Pamela.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Is there anything else you would like to add in addition to your bio?
No, that was a lovely introduction. I guess one thing I would like to add is just thank you for having me here to talk about the work that Lean In has been doing on your platform. You went over a little bit of my career history, and a lot of those places have been predominantly not Black. And so having groups like the Black Career Women's Network is so important. You know, I wish I had this kind of support when I first started out in my work. I think we are naturally, communal and we want to support each other, but we don't always have the structure in place. And so I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And I'm just happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. So happy to have you again. So for those of you who are not in the literary circle but have joined us tonight, one of our selections this quarter was the Lean In and McKinsey and Co. Report that was published in June of 2020. It is called The Status of Black Women in Corporate America. We wanted to start off the literary circle with that report, because 2020 was a mess, and we thought that this conversation was needed. So that's what we really wanted to start 2021 off with. So Pamela, why don't you go ahead and give us some insight as to why was it important for the Lean In organization to publish this report?
Yes, so there's a long backstory before we got to 2020 and putting out this report. Lean In was founded in 2013 by Sheryl Sandberg, who is the CEO of Facebook. It has the same name as her best-selling book. And our mission is to empower women, to promote women's advancement and leadership, and just to fight bias, which we know is everywhere and including the workplace. And so as we're trying to pursue that mission, you can't fight something if you don't really know what you're fighting against. And so in 2015, we started partnering with McKinsey and Company, the consulting firm, and we created the first Women in the Workplace report. And so it'll be 6 years this year of us putting out this report every year. It is the largest data set on women in corporate America and also women of color in corporate America, because we know there's not one story of women. So over those years, we have tracked, the data and experiences of Black women, Latinas. Most recently, we also expanded to include women who identify as LGBTQ and women with disabilities, because, intersectionality has been really at the forefront of our minds, and we're trying to be more and more inclusive. So from the beginning, that's kind of the journey that we've been on. The State of Black Women in Corporate America report is actually just putting all that research in one place, because we already had it, but sometimes it's all about the packaging. So if you really want to focus on a particular group, it was just nice to have it in one report and kind of put it out there again. Another thing is the research was saying the same thing over and over again every year. We also have other research that we do, but kind of the pattern was that women are having a harder time in the workplace than men. Women of color are having a hard time in the workplace than white women, and then Black women are having a particularly difficult time in corporate America. And so we really thought that if you want to make systemic change, you do have to start with the most marginalized. And that's why it was really important for us to put out the report. Now, we didn't do it every year. It just so happened that that we put out this report in 2020. It was a couple of different factors. One, Lean has just been on its own journey. I know when we started, there was a conception that it was just for rich white women, and it wasn't as inclusive as it could be. And people didn't really have the behind the scenes look of what the organization was doing, how we were evolving. So I've been there a little over 3 years, and the organization is 7 years old. It'll be 7 years old. So we're pretty young. But over time, I've seen the team grow and evolve. We hired a lot more Black women. And at the beginning, around like April of last year, I remember just looking at, we had put out some new research. I think it was like the impact of COVID or something like that. And it was the same pattern that Black women were being disproportionately affected. And so I was like, we need to highlight this. We need to talk about this. I knew that I would have the support from the organization, but it was also great to have fellow Black women that I was working with to kind of have my back and put our heads together first to say, this is what we want to highlight, and let's bring a proposal to the leadership team. And so that was kind of the impetus of that. We created a new webpage on our website that incorporated not only our research, but other research. If there were data gaps that we just didn't have in our back pocket. We wanted to be inclusive. We wanted to include trans women, other like multiple Black women's experiences, to talk about the impact of COVID-19, to talk about the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so that was the page. And then out of that, we created like the report just to make it a little more formal, because, we know what it's like to talk to companies and media. They want that, formal name. So we were able to create that. We gave it a beautiful name, and the response was pretty amazing. The timing, obviously, the whole world was talking about the experiences of Black people in society, but the workplace is not a vacuum. It's not a neutral zone. So that trickled into talking about the experiences of Black people at work, and the interest was there. So we always had it. We were always pushing it out, but we couldn't ignore this unique opportunity when people were hungry to actually listen for once and taking that information and put action behind it. So that is the long story behind how it came to be.
Thank you. And we appreciate you and your colleagues kind of, being a trailblazer in this space and publishing it, because I think so many times and previously before the report, there was no data. And so there could have potentially have been a case if we took this, oh, you're making that up, where's your data, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have data, now there's validation to say, okay, this is what this is called. This is not, it's not just here, it's everywhere. So again, for the lovers of data like myself, thank you so much.
And you know what? I'm not a lover of data. I'm a word person. But I realized through working at Lean In and just us being such a research heavy org, it is validating, because like you said, you could be in a space experiencing something, small, like a microaggression, or, a major problem at your company. And you start questioning yourself. Is it me? Is it just my manager? Oh, this was a little thing. I should brush it off. And so to understand that, unfortunately, it's a widespread problem, like you said, it's very validating when you're trying to build buy-in with your companies. You can, pull out the report, please pull out the State of Black Women in America report. And that is the proof, that is the credibility. I think lived experiences should be valid. Like, people should take people at their word that, this is what I'm going through. It should be enough. but to make the case that, this is part of a systemic problem all over America, and we're not the exception to the rule, that is a powerful thing itself.
And I think for organizations like ours, for Black Career Women's Network, who was in this space and having these conversations and doing the work prior to it being such now a common conversation, it's like, okay, you guys were talking about this before, but now we have some hard data to back that. So where before it was just us being able to share our experiences and supporting each other and offering up tools and resources to navigate it. But this for us and for women like ourselves who do this work, having reports like this is important, because it's like, okay, this is what we've been telling you guys about. This is what we've been talking about for many, many years in reference to our experiences in the workplace. So it just brings another level of validation, not that we need it, but validation to the conversations and the experiences that women have had, and that now they can be listened to and really paid attention to in the way that they should have in the beginning.
Right. And that's really a microaggression so to speak, in and of itself, not listening and, just waiting until, oh, there's actually data. Oh, yeah, you were correct. So yeah, I would agree with you, Sherry. So how has this work really impacted you personally?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've actually never worked in like an explicit corporate setting, but everything that the research talks about completely tracks with my experience. And I feel very lucky to be engaged in work that feels very relevant and personal to my life. Again, my career has been very varied and all over the place, but the one kind of guiding light for me was, it needs to matter. Like, I don't want to be, selling socks. No offense to anyone who's selling socks for a living, but that's just not going to make me want to get up in the morning and give it my all. So having the work be relevant and really elevating people like myself, like my mother, like my friends, like my sister who will soon be joining the workforce, it just makes me feel really good. And it's also given me the opportunity to just have deeper conversations, both with other Black women, but people of all backgrounds, because I just have the knowledge in my back pocket, which is why I'm really passionate about doing these kind of talks. Just, I want everybody to be able to speak to it in the same way. I can get very argumentative when I'm passionate about a subject. So I love being able to say, well, my company does this research and this is what the data says and stuff like that. If, that's how the conversation is going. So yeah, it's just super motivating. It really validates kind of the choices that I made in my career. Not necessarily the flashiest thing or the most lucrative thing, but something that really means a lot to me. And I can look back and just think, this was time well spent.
Yes. Again, thanks. So I want to give you the opportunity to kind of share some highlights of the report. So I'll share my screen in a second, but ladies in the chat, ask questions, engage with us, let us know your thoughts as we're going through these data points and kind of discussing these highlights. So we want to hear from you, and we want to make this as conversational as possible. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, Sherry, you gotta enable screen sharing.
All right, I will do that. I didn't know I had it even on. Hold on.
So Pamela, while we're waiting to screen share, about how many people were involved in this report in regards to the work and actually getting it together?
Oh, it was definitely a team effort. I don't even know the exact number, but between our team and then McKinsey's team, it was definitely a collaborative effort. We also worked with the Wall Street Journal to put out a special edition of the Wall Street Journal when the report comes out, so that, we have pages dedicated to really breaking down the different angles to the report. And then we also do events. So we do 2 events in collaboration with the Wall Street Journal. They used to be in person, now they're virtual, but it's definitely a team effort. And the great thing about it is, even though it centers Black women, it wasn't just Black women working on this. From our president, to vice president, to our writers, to our researchers, our education team, everybody was 100% bought into this, and that is a really great feeling.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, we can see the screen now. Awesome.
Yep. Okay.
Now, real quick before you move to the next slide, I know that there was another study done prior to this one. Was it 2015? Is that correct? Was it 2015 that they did a study prior to this one?
We've done it every year since 2000.
Every year? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you go back one slide again? So people were asking where you can find the report. So the larger report on all women will be found at womenintheworkplace.com. And then the one where we pulled out the data specific to Black women can be found at leanin.org/state of Black women. And so I've done these talks at different types of groups and organizations. And for this group in particular, I don't want to be preaching to the choir, because I'm assuming most of you all are Black women or somewhat familiar with the experiences that we go through. But these stats that I pulled out, I thought would be really valuable for us to know as Black women, when we're talking to colleagues, when we're talking to managers, leadership, or even just having a casual conversation about the DEI space and supporting Black women in corporate America. And so I hope these will be of value. One thing that we always survey these companies on through this research is their commitment to gender equity. And the overwhelming majority of them say, yes, we are committed to gender equity. Maybe a lot of them have started kind of tracking their numbers and looking internally to see what's going on. If they're part of taking the Women in the Workplace survey, they will certainly have some of those data points. But what a lot of them are failing to do is actually capturing gender and race combined. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that only 7% of companies set representation targets for race and gender together. So that's problematic, because as Black women, we don't get to pick which one we are on what day. We're both at the same time. And so if you're really pushing for gender equity or racial equity as separate things, you are kind of leaving us out of the conversation. It's going to be hard to really capture what we're going through, and there might be certain patterns that you're going to be missing. So as this cartoon kind of shows in a really neat way, these women of color are at this conference, and there's a gender diversity conference and a racial diversity conference, and they're asking which one for us. So one thing that you might bring up to your leadership, or even just start thinking about starting conversations about, is if your company is trying to do right by us, you could ask, do we actually measure race and gender combined? Do we separate out different types of women of color? Because even there's so many levels that we can go into. But just that intersectionality piece is going to be crucial for companies moving forward. If you really, we're in 2021, the cookie cutter, hey, we're doing some woman thing. It's just not enough, as we've seen. And you don't want to be behind the curve. You want to be ahead of the curve, proactively making your workplaces great for Black women, for women of color overall. So representation targets for gender and race combined, and even beyond that, because sometimes they do track, okay, this is how many Black women we have at the company, but are we advancing at the same rates? Are we being hired at the same rates? Is it a revolving door of Black women? So there's a lot of different ways that you can track our progress and our experiences, and that is just the baseline. Again, you cannot fix what you don't see, what you haven't measured. And so that would be our number one recommendation. Number two, if you can go to this next slide. The 2019 report illuminated something for us called the Broken Rung. So when we talk about representation, diversity, a lot of the times company will say it's a pipeline problem, or there's a lot of conversation about the glass ceiling. So it is definitely important that for every 100 C-suite leaders, there's only one Black woman. That number is unacceptable, but there's a lot of steps in between starting your career and becoming a C-suite leader. And what we found is that the most critical step is at the first step to manager. So the first time you enter a manager role, that's when we start to see the disparity. When people start out their careers, they kind of have pretty much the same level of experience. We found that women and men, Black women and everybody else put themselves out there, asks for, promotions and equal pay at the same rates as everybody else. But when it comes to becoming a manager, that's when we start to see a huge disparity. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that for every 100 men hired to becoming a manager, only 64 Black women are. And if you go to the next slide, for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 58 Black women are. Now I just have a hard, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so where do you think, what goes wrong kind of in that process between going from an individual contributor to a manager of people, or just that title? What is lacking for it?
There's a lot of possibilities. Most of them come down to bias in many different ways. I don't think that Black women are inherently less intelligent than or less capable to lead or manage than everyone else. And so there's a couple of things. I think a lot of research, not just Lean In, but a lot of research has shown that men are kind of rated against their potential versus what they've proven. So if you're all kind of started on the same base, we kind of have the same level of experience or lack thereof, and now it's time for you to take that next big step to manager, men will probably get more of the benefit of the doubt that, oh, he has the potential to, be a great manager, to be a great leader, versus women, Black women, you have to have proven it before they give you that chance. And I think that is probably a major factor in where we start to see that disparity. And it just grows and grows from there, right? If you already have an advantage, it's no surprise that with each level, it's just going to be less and less of us. So I think that would be one major contributor to that disparity. It's not anything that we should internalize as Black women, but it's just something to be aware of. If anyone can relate to, you just feel stuck at that, why am I not being promoted? I've also talked to different Black women who say maybe they do get to that manager level, but then they're stuck in middle management and they just can't get past that. That's like, it's not the ultimate glass ceiling, but there's a lot of different ceilings underneath there. But the biggest disparity is that first step up to manager. And when you think about it, it's incredibly problematic because there's a lot of focus on senior leadership, and they do have a lot of power in companies, but those managers have such an impact on people's day-to-day experiences. If you've ever had a bad manager in your experience, that it just makes it a little harder to get up at work every day. You don't trust them, you can't lean on them. The communication is not there. And imagine that, there's so little Black women being promoted into that position. They don't have the same cultural competence. There's only so much you can teach someone through a training. If you just live it, you can speak the same language, you have that same representation. So it's really important for companies to be aware of that because it will have a trickle effect on your recruitment, retention, and overall workplace culture if, Black women are not being put in that management position.
And you said something in terms of like potential versus being, white men, being able to be promoted based on potential, where for we have to prove it. And I think sometimes we also need to recognize that it may never be said. It will just it'll be a silent expectation that we'll have to prove, ourselves versus coming out and saying it during your one-on-one or your annual review. So you definitely need to be clear that more than likely, and this goes back to kind of falling under the bias piece, that you need to keep that, be mindful of the fact that more than likely you will need to prove it without it ever being said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, I mean, I was going to get into that later, but that's why having like clear, transparent criteria that everybody knows and that everyone is measured against is really important to fight against bias, so that it's not based on the whim of someone's gut feeling or their relationship with you or their own bias. Like, you just need it laid out, and then, you know, make sure that the receipt match the advancement. And that's just one way to combat that.
Right.
But yes, going on to the next slide, continuing to talk about the impact of managers. Like I said, not only do they have a huge impact on your workplace experience, but on your career advancement as well. And so when you think about the types of things that managers are responsible for, they are responsible for advocating for your work, for giving visibility to your work, for presenting opportunities for you, for helping you navigate workplace politics, especially if you're more junior and you know you just don't have that experience. So Black women across the board, you know, we had a couple criteria that we asked Black women to share, and across the board they were receiving less support. If you look at the numbers, if it's red, it means having a worse experience. If it's green, having a better experience. And you can just see that clear column that we are struggling. I mean, it's just only 22% of Black women say their managers help them manage their career path. Only 29% of Black women say their managers help them or advocate for them to have new opportunities. That is unacceptable. That is such a small number. And so when I look at this, there's two things. This is just my personal opinion. It's not lean in sanction, but one, definitely we need more manager training. But also, as a Black woman, you know, if you're in that position, if anything is resonating on this list and you're like, I'm not getting that support, this might be an opportunity for you to be very explicit with your manager and saying that, hey, this is a widespread pattern. I'm also experiencing this, and I really need you to be cognizant of these things that I need from you, because if I don't get it now, I'm probably not going to get it. And so just starting that conversation, this would be a great opportunity. You can bring the report and say, hey, it's not just me, you know, respectfully, this is the support that I need from you, because it's going to have an impact on my career. Everything builds on everything else. And so when you start out, that's one thing that I wish I knew. I wish I had known this report existed when I first started out, because you are told that the workplace is a meritocracy, that if you work hard, your career path is going to reflect the hard work that you put in. I didn't get the same messaging about the impact that managers have, sponsorship, just someone else speaking on your behalf and telling the other person, hey, she does great work. And so this is a great conversation starter for anyone who, you know, is either managing a Black woman or someone, or a Black woman who has a manager. This would be great to mention to them.
And you know, it's even more shocking when you think about how little our population is in different corporations and organizations. We may, you know, we might be 10%, 5%, 8% of the population there, but we see over here 25% of Black women are feeling like their manager actually helped them navigate. So you're right, absolutely unacceptable. So we had a couple of questions come in, so I just want to read a few really quickly. Deanna Carter. So hey, so Deanna is actually, we're reading her book for March, Bed of Roses, but she says, how do companies set their representation targets?
It's definitely going to vary from company to company. There's no one size fits all rule. I think the more intersectional you can make those targets, the better. But even more than setting the targets, enforcing the targets. So making it part of people's goals, part of people's you know, advancement, putting it in the hiring description. That's one thing, you know. Recently, we have a podcast on podcast on LinkedIn called Tilted, and we had Shelly Archambault, who's one of the first Black women CEOs in Silicon Valley come and talk to us. And we asked her, what is one thing companies can do to get more Black women in the door? And she said, just make a little adjustment to your criteria and to your job description. Instead of saying, for example, knows how to build a team, say knows how to build a diverse team, knows how to manage a team, knows how to manage a diverse team, knows how to, scale this. No, so just having that expectation will actually move the needle more and actually make those targets mean something, because people have been talking about, we want to change our numbers, we want to change our numbers for a long time. Did the numbers change? Not that much, not that much. So you need those incentives. You need to treat it as a business priority the same way that you would treat, the bottom line that you're supposed to meet, whatever your obligations to your shareholders, the same urgency, the same incentive, the same reward that you would. But how that breakdown is going to look like, it really depends on the company. It depends on how far they are on their journey, how big they are. But you should start somewhere. We're a very small company at Lean In. We're 30 something people. It's easier for us if you're global. You don't want to try to fix it overnight, but start somewhere. Or maybe you start with a region, you start with an office, or you start with a vertical, and you start tracking and implementing certain things, and you see how it goes, and then you scale it for the whole company. But there's just no excuse. Just because you don't know exactly the right way to do it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, and doesn't mean that you shouldn't start.
Thanks for your answer. And Sherry, were you saying something?
No, I actually was reading another question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, by Tiffany P. She was asking, what ways could a Black woman manager stuck in C-suite leadership position help advocate for a Black woman who is an individual contributor advance from current role within the organization? So you want to elaborate on that, Pamela?
So this is a Black woman in the C-suite who is wanting to advance an individual contributor. I guess I need a little bit more details. I'm wondering, are they in your same department or just in general? I feel like if you're in the C-suite, you would have a lot of weight to use to be able to advocate for someone. But if there's a concern of, I'm reaching to someone who's so below, and they might look like favoritism. I don't really know the intent behind the question. But I think allyship and sponsorship is where it plays a role. And this will go for the C-suite or for anyone. If you feel uncomfortable as a Black woman advocating for another Black woman, just champion her to someone of a different background, maybe, who can spread the word, if you will, about their accomplishments, and just be bought in. So any kind of buy-in that you can build across backgrounds, across departments will be beneficial. But I'm struggling a little bit with the question.
Yeah, and I think that she did some continuing here. She said, same department, but it's only Black women within any type of leadership position. She may feel uncomfortable. And I think that if you are in the C-suite, you're in a position to where you can educate this individual contributor and, give them some advice on how to build relationships with, key influencers, or, helping them to navigate, politics in the workplace. If they're having some trouble with communicating, looking at, helping to support their communication style to where they can communicate with all levels of leadership. So it doesn't have to be the relationship that you're establishing with them and how you're supporting them in their development doesn't need to be broadcast across the organization. This could be a opportunity for you and this other person to, whether you go have a cup of coffee in the mornings before you get to work, or if you go off to lunch together and have a conversation. So it doesn't have to be broadcast that you're supporting this person. Even if they don't report to you, but you see there is something special about this person, yeah, I mean, what you're doing is giving back and helping someone to level up in their career that they may not be getting that support anywhere else.
100% agree. But another factor, which I think ties into the next point I was going to make, is the only experience. And so if you go to the next slide, this is the problem with being the only Black woman in a position of power. There's a lot of pressure on you. and there's a lot of scrutiny. If you look at the research that we did, how are Black women who are either the only one on their team or in their space feeling? They feel under pressure to perform. They feel as if their individual actions are going to reflect on the entire race. They feel closely watched, and they just feel like a burden to just carry everybody. And so one of the recommendations that we give to companies is try to make the only experience rare. If you have, let's say you have 5 teams and you have 5 Black women, don't put one Black woman on each team and think, oh, you have diversity, we did a great job, because they're still going to feel isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But being the token is not a good experience. You're not doing a great job. When you have 2 or more, that's when people start feeling empowered. Lean In is actually the most Black women I've ever worked with in my career. And it was really liberating because we weren't a monolith. Like when I said an opinion, I wasn't speaking for every Black woman in the world. So I didn't have that pressure on my shoulders. They didn't just run with what I said. It was great to get perspectives from Black women with different experiences. When we were leading on each other, it wasn't just a one go-to person that just has to carry. Every time something happens with a Black woman, they come to me. Anytime, I've talked to women in the C-suite and they feel a lot of pressure. I'm the only Black woman, the visible, powerful Black woman. Everyone wants to be mentored by me. Everyone wants me to advocate for me. It's all on my shoulders. I'm also doing my day job. I'm also doing everything else that I have to do. And so the less common you make the only experience, from the most junior level to the most senior level, the better. It tends to play out more on the senior level because, again, that pipeline, that representation gets smaller and smaller. But yes, just having one Black woman, you're like, okay, we have that representation. We're good. Let's put out a press release. We did it. No, you didn't do it. That's just the beginning, because it is still isolating. And for people to feel empowered, you don't want to be the odd one out, And so that's something for people to keep in mind moving forward. That would address, I think, the last question as well, of just not being put in that position. Let's say that individual contributor had 3 or 4 people to go to. You would feel a little better about it, right? Like you would all be inputting and advocating for her, and it wouldn't feel like just this weird relationship of, why are you all the way up here, reaching down to someone down there. And so that's also more of like that systemic change that companies can implement, that can help us. And another benefit to that is it sends out a big message, because sometimes when I talk to Black women and I'm like, yeah, let's stick together, they'll be like, Pam, I have to be honest with you. The person who made my life hell at my last job was a Black woman. She didn't advocate for me. I had expectation that she was going to support me and be there for me. And it felt like she was threatened by me. And so sometimes we put that blame on ourselves, or we also put that burden on ourselves. You thought because we were both Black women that she was, going to be your knight in shining armor. But if there were more of us, you wouldn't have that expectation. If you saw Black women everywhere, you would just be like, hey, if we click, we click. If we don't, we don't. If you have something to offer me, great. If you don't, great. Right. And so removing that zero-sum environment from the company experience will also help, so that we can support each other without feeling like, there's only room for one of us, and that will impact like our interpersonal dynamics as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that experience happens as well. We do definitely need to get away from that. All right. Any other questions, or go ahead and move on?
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. This is one of the quotes from the State of Black Women in Corporate America report. So we do have a lot of numbers and data, but we also think it's really important to amplify voices and experience throughout that report. So this woman that we talked to, she was a mid-level administrator, 4 years at her company, and she said, I feel like I have to represent the entire race. I need to come across as more than proficient, more than competent, more than capable. I have to be on all the time, because in the back of someone's mind, they could be judging the entire race based on me. And I'm sure that a lot of us have heard that, work twice as hard to get half as much. It's not a fair position to be in, And so again, when we reduce that only experience, that can make a big impact. And it can allow what I think is our natural, like, collective nature to really thrive, the way that we support each other, gravitate towards each other, and want to uplift each other, that can actually thrive in an environment where you feel like there's enough room for all of us. We can all win together.
Mhm.
And that leads us to my next slide, which we actually talked to Black women. We asked them, so we found that Black women were highly motivated to be top executives. And we asked them, what is the motivation behind what your aspiration? And they said they wanted to not only have individual success, but also to improve their workplaces. So you'll see that we want to have a positive impact on the world. 52% of us want to influence the culture of our workplace. 52% of us want to impact the success of our entire company. 49% of us want to be a role model for others like us. And 25% said financial reward and security. And so that is also a great message to send to companies. When you invest in Black women, you're investing in the entire company. You're investing in, that pipeline that you want to create so much. Like we are fighting for this. So the more that you empower us, give us the budget, give us the titles, give us what we need, we will make it happen because we're really motivated and dedicated to this cause. And also, we create better business results. There's been many studies that show the more diverse a company is, the more profits they have. So that's a little cherry on top if you want to talk corporate. If I want to speak your same language, there's so many incentives to being part of this conversation and pushing us forward.
Yeah, I love this slide because we do want to make a difference as leaders, and we desire that. So I think it's about making sure that we have leaders in place that understand that. And so, it's been a long time coming, decades. Let's just call it what it is when it comes to the same conversation around putting leaders into roles that really are not leadership material, right? And so that has been a couple of decades old in terms of the conversation, which still the needle has not moved much in that part of the process. I do think that there is times where we have to hold them accountable for that change, and not necessarily around a D&I initiative, just on a one-on-one basis. Someone has to go in it and proactively be the one to say, I'm going to send you to this training. I'm going to support you in this development because I want you to change how we do things in our department, right? Because if one department does great, then someone else will follow and lead that because they see the success of what they're doing in those departments. So we need more leaders that think like that sometimes are not waiting for the company to create the initiative, but they want to be able to set an example on their own and create influence, in being able to move the needle and, I guess, lead by example is what I'm really trying to say overall.
That is what leadership is. A
Mhm,
lot of the times we rely on shortcuts. Well, I say we, but I don't think myself, but people rely on shortcuts of this is what a leader looks like. Someone who looks like a leader. He's usually an older white man. But what is leadership? Leadership is pushing the envelope. Leadership is being ahead of the curve. If you have the same people being recycled in the same roles, why are you surprised that now you're being caught off guard, in 2020 of, oh, we didn't know. We'll work on it. We'll work on it. If you had already empowered people like us, you would have been doing it. You would have been prepared. And so redefining what leadership means. And the people who are most poised to be leaders are usually people who have been marginalized because they're innovative. They've had to kind of push through these biases in very creative ways. And they can also bring in new talent and relate to them and talk to them in a way that others would not be able to. So yeah, definitely redefining what leadership looks like is an important part of this.
And I want to quickly go back to what you said in regards to holding leadership accountable. What are some tips that you have, or how can we do that without seemingly, just them being perceiving us as this angry Black woman, right? I mean, I believe the report had a little bit in there about the angry Black woman, because of course we're passionate. We want to make a difference. We want to make the workplace better. And so some people don't like being held accountable. So how can we do that without, coming across as this angry Black woman?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one, post summer of 2020, I think we have a lot of leverage to make that happen, because if your company put out a statement last year saying Black Lives Matter, we want to do better, you have that receipt in your back pocket to hold them to. But it is important to sometimes meet people where they are, as far as what is actually going to incentivize you, what is actually going to track with you as far as how you view business, how you view the workplace. And so when we talk to companies, we usually we talk about diverse teams have better results, because that's what people kind of care about, unfortunately. When we talk about, well, you made this lofty statement about how you're going to do better, we need to tackle this in the same way that we tackle all of our other business priorities. So really laying it out in a quote unquote objective way. I don't like giving this advice, but this is, how you build buy-in. What are the criteria? What are the numbers we need to hit? How do we get there? Really presenting it as strategic thinking. You want more Black women in this role, in this function. How are we going to get there? How are we going to get from A to B? Look at our recruitment. Are we recruiting from the same 3 schools? And our numbers are not changing. Let's expand. Let's recruit from HBCUs, community colleges. Do our requirements really need a bachelor's degree, a master's degree? If someone has learned the skills and they can demonstrate that they can do the job, but they haven't had the means to be in this traditional educational setting, maybe we can get rid of that requirement. A lot of, progressive companies are starting to get rid of certain requirements. Going back to what I said before, adding the word diverse, or even explicitly saying, like, as part of our business strategy, we want to be inclusive, we want to do better on that. So just speaking that language, it really depends from company to company, but you know what your company values, you know how things get done at your company. So the more your case can align with what's there, that will help you get further. But it is difficult to hold senior leadership accountable. At the same time, because of last year and even before, companies, I used to work in PR, so it's a really bad look if you're behind on this. That's another case that you can make. You don't want to be the company that all of a sudden employee after employee starts talking about, I had a horrible, time, they didn't respect me as a Black person. You don't want to be that. And also other companies do not want to be associated and do business with that kind of bad press. So whatever angle is going to get you there, some people, it'll be out of the kindness of their heart. Others, it'll be the bottom line. Others, it'll be bad press. Others, there's so many different motivations that people have. So if you kind of understand who your audience is, there is always a case to be made to build diverse teams. There's no scenario, there's no incentive where our message will not resonate. It's just about finding out which one will resonate best with who you're talking to.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll move to the next slide for us. Here we go.
Great, so these are kind of our general recommendations. For companies, we have a lot of recommendations, but these are some that I would like to highlight for this audience. Again, gender and race combined when we're putting together targets, require a diverse slate of final candidates for every position. So we found there's research that shows that if you have, for example, one Black woman who's in a finalist, she has statistically a 0% chance of getting the job. If there are 2 Black women, the chances of a Black woman ending up in the position rises dramatically. So requiring diverse slates, it doesn't mean lowering the bar. People always think, oh, you have to lower the bar. No, the bar stays the same, but if it takes you a little bit longer to find people, or you got to look, a little farther than you were initially going to, just be committed to make sure that finalist slate is diverse. Again, clear, consistent criteria. So it's not based on someone's gut feeling or I don't like, the way their tone, or I don't know if they're a good fit. Clear, consistent criteria. Making the only experience less common. So don't just put one Black woman on that team, put two, so that we don't have all the pressure. Comprehensive allyship and anti-racism training, looking at company and team norms, the things that you kind of take for granted. That's where a lot of the microaggressions come in. Just take a closer look at those. And then share the metrics and reward progress. Be transparent. Let everybody know what's going on. And also when people are really working hard to make change, reward it like we reward anything else. Because a lot of this work tends to fall on the ERGs or the HR department or the DEI department. So if you give incentive and you reward every department for committing to diversity, because Black women, we're not limited to certain silos, we show up everywhere. See more of that drive to make it happen, where people might have previously thought, hey, it's not my job, I'm in finance, what does this have to do with me,
Great.
And are there any other questions, or we can also move on? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me, oops. I think there are some questions.
Yeah, we have about 8 questions in the queue right now, so we want to make sure we try to get to.
So Piper Belay, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, asks, do you find Black women are not considered if they do not have a manager title versus men, or if they needed more years with the title to move up than men?
I think both. Yeah, I think that will happen. It kind of tracks with what I was saying about potential versus like proving yourself. So whether you need more years to be considered, or your transferable skills are put into question because you didn't have the title, I think both of those definitely play out.
Thank you. Ooh, this is a good one. Elaine Jackson asks, how can we address jealousy of African Americans versus West Indians? Silent struggle between Africans and Black women. Question.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Without going too deep into that, I will say for myself, I'm of West African descent, and I think I understand sometimes we make those distinctions because we're aware of how our communities interact with each other. But when it comes to advancing in the workplace, I think it's really important for us to stand in solidarity with each other. And instead of, again, going back to that zero-sum mentality, there's room for all of us. So if I win as, a West African, my African-American counterpart will also win, because I will make sure that she's uplifted in the same way, make sure to advocate for systemic change, for workplace change, culture change that will help uplift all of us. Again, like I was saying, I work with a lot of Black women now, and we're from all different backgrounds, East, West, immigrant, biracial, multiracial. And I think the empowerment that we've had from just coming together wouldn't have happened if we started to kind of divide ourselves by ethnicity or country of origin. And so I think just the mindset, whatever you're confronting, if you're able to be kind of a bridge maker and bring people together and understand that this challenge that we have in front of us is bigger than our individual presentations of Blackness, I think you'll get further along.
All right, now on this slide here, it says more than 80% of white employees consider themselves allies to be people of color at work, but only a quarter of Black women say it's mostly accurate that Black women have strong allies in the workplace.
Yeah.
Why is the big disparity in the perception?
Yeah, so this is actually from a responsive survey that we conducted last summer in collaboration with SurveyMonkey, due to Black Lives Matter and everything, just it being in the forefront of conversation. And I think this was a really important data point to include, especially for us, because there is a gap. People think that they're doing right by us, especially if you are in a more liberal environment. They're like, I'm an ally. I would never be racist. I will always advocate for you. I'll always support you. But we don't feel that support. And so the message that we're sending with this, the awareness that people need to have is you don't get to choose if you're being a good ally. It's the person receiving the allyship who gets to choose if, it's actually working for them. And it was really interesting because even at Lean In, we had a similar experience, I think, after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. With all the research that we had done, our non-Black coworkers were very eager to be there for us and to support us and to reach out. But we had to have a conversation. We had it team-wide together as a collective to let them know that it's not a switch that you can flip. And so kind of going on to the next slide, in order to practice allyship, you need to build trust. And so if you have a coworker that you never talk to about their experiences outside of work, you never ask them about their experiences with racism, and then something happens in the news and all of a sudden you're like, I'll be there for you. Like, if you want to talk, let's chat. I'm not going to be comfortable. We don't have that rapport. And so what you think is being a good ally, I'm reaching out, now feels to me, it's just more pressure. How can I reject you nicely without coming off as ungrateful, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that we want to communicate to companies as they're building their diverse teams and as they're committing to this work, it takes time, it's not overnight. It takes trust, it takes relationships. Black women are not a monolith. So being an ally to me is not gonna look the same as being an ally to somebody else.
Right.
It takes a lot of listening. Like the slide says, and we should be considered as the subject matter experts of our own experiences. Don't ask me for proof, don't ask me for follow-up, don't ask me for, this is the reality of my experience. And I think for anyone who is listening, who has had to have those uncomfortable conversations where maybe somebody's reaching out to you and you don't want to come off as ungrateful, because it's better than silence. It's better than someone not acknowledging the fact that what happens in the outside world is going to impact the way that I show up when I log into work every day. If another Black person is killed by police, I might not be myself. I'm not going to be smiling, pretending that everything is okay. So we want that acknowledgement, but then beyond that, it's going to look different. And part of it is having authentic relationships with Black women, the same way that you would strive to have an authentic relationship with anybody else. If you think about practicing allyship, like taking a test, you can't read the chapters of the book 5 minutes before, take the test and expect to get an A. So the same way that just because something happens in the news, now all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I need to show up. You're not going to know how to show up if you haven't kind of put in the time and the work to educate yourself, but also build relationships with the individual Black women on your team to understand, like, what is their style. Some people, they retreat, they want to be left alone. Others, yes, please, I was waiting for someone to talk to, and they vent. Everybody has different needs and different styles. And so that's something to take into consideration as well. The subject of allyship, I think I've never heard the word ally as much as I did last year. And to that end, we are, Lean In is building an allyship program from scratch. So it'll be launching later this year. We're working with an amazing group of experts. I'm involved with it as well. And we just saw that there was a huge need because, again, the research shows there's a gap between what people think they're doing and what people actually need. So.
Yeah, that is so true. And that was one of the questions I actually had for you. And I'm sorry, my internet kicked me off for a hot second. So of course it wouldn't be, working from home time if some internet issue didn't pop up. But one of the questions that I had was, there was a huge discrepancy between white men and white women in the workplace thinking they are an ally, but Black women feeling as though they don't have an ally. What does that conversation needs to look like as a Black woman who's either potentially looking for an ally, or to just kind of say, hey, I think there needs to be some work done here.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple things to consider. One, everybody is on different journeys. Everyone is, you know, some people are further along, some people are just learning the basic vocabulary and just finding out that the workplace is not a meritocracy, the world is not equal. And so you kind of have to know who you're dealing with, and also think about what kind of support do you need, do you want and need from them? And this is just on an individual level. So for example, my manager, because our relationship is very impactful on my day-to-day in my career advancement, I need you to be a little bit further along. And so I might be a little bit more hands-on in communicating, as a Black woman, these are my experiences, it's what I need. For somebody else, let's say someone in passing who's hosting a conference or something, I might not need to have a close relationship with you, but you being an ally might be you putting me up for being part of that panel, something like that. So you don't have to expect the world from everybody because you're just going to be disappointed, but really think strategically, like, what do I need? Is it more emotional support? Is it just, if someone's reaching out to you and saying, Pam, what do you need from me? And you look at them and you're like, I don't need you to know everything about my life. I'm not going to pour my heart out to you, but you're in a position of influence. If you put my name forward for this project that's coming up, or if you invite me to this meeting, I would really appreciate it. Or, if I have to call in Black and you can take, this thing off of my desk for, tomorrow or the next day, I would appreciate it. So it really depends, as Black women, those are the calculations that we can make in our head, because it can get really frustrating when you're hoping that everybody gets it and they don't, and then, you're just disappointed over and over again. So just think about yourself, your needs, what's going to help you in your career, what's going to help you make it through the week, and communicate that with people. But I do think that it should be a larger conversation if we want widespread change. For example, I spoke at a company and they had started having conversations company-wide about intersectionality. And I was just like one part of that conversation. And it was really great to hear that I'm not the one introducing this to you for the first time. I'm just adding some more context and value. And you made it normal and you made it okay across your company to talk about allyship, to talk about intersectionality, to talk about making mistakes, to kind of call each other out and call each other in and work on this journey together through this shared mission and shared language. So yeah, there's just a lot of different ways to tackle it. It's a huge thing. I mean, even people don't agree on what allyship means. There's no one definition. So you just kind of have to take it as an individual and figure out what works best for you. But I think communicating your needs is really important.
Yeah, communicating your needs is critical. You definitely need to know what you want and then express that to your manager, and how it's not just about how you want to support them, make them look good, but it's how, you want to also make clear to them how you want to be supported. And then that gives you an opportunity to see if they're going to show up and just that. And and that way you can make a decision on whether what you want to do next. Right. You want to put Crystal, you're right, put the ball in their court.
Yes.
When it comes to being clear about the expectations of what you want and how you want to be supported, and hold them accountable for that. And if they have any kind of decent morals or values, then they're like, okay, well, she's asking for this or he's asking for this. Let me see what I can do. And I think that sometimes we are not clear enough, or like you said, the communication's not there. We're not setting the expectations by sharing with them what we want or what we need to be successful, and then allowing them to to make sure they show who they really are. And I think the more that we do that, the better off we'll be. Or we can make a decision and say, well, this place is not for me, maybe I need to move on. And that's a hard decision that for some people that you may need to make. But again, at the end of the day, as anything else in our personal lives that we don't want to play with, you don't want to play with your career either. So you take that just as seriously as you do anything else, and know that if you know who you are and what you bring to the table, if you're not going to get where you are, then you definitely need to be thinking about taking that somewhere else. I'm a big advocate of that. You know,
Right.
go where you can grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely, I agree. I have a lot of conversations with different Black women about this, even standing your ground and walking away. And
Yeah.
it breaks my heart sometimes because I'm fairly young and they say, I would have never had your confidence and audacity at your age. I kind of kept my head down and I thought that would be okay. And I did have a long lasting career, but I look back and I just wish that I had just stood up for myself a little bit more and centered my own needs and not wait for the company to meet me, but also say, I've tried my best and now I'm choosing myself over choosing the
Mhm.
company. And I think me having access to this research has empowered me so much. And that's why I try to share with as many people as possible, because when you realize that it's just bigger than you, it's not just in your head, you also realize that you can make a choice and you can, be vocal and stand in your truth and also find a different path for yourself if it's not working.
Yeah, self-advocacy, I can't even say it right. It's huge for the workplace. You know, being your own self-advocate. There's a lot to be said for speaking up for yourself, and
Mhm.
not being afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations, even with your own manager. You really have to be clear on who you're dealing with, and you've got to know that. And instead of allowing yourself to be blindsided or under assumptions, like you said, that communication has to be there so you can see where you stand with things in your own positioning within the company, in your career overall. All right,
Right.
yeah, good stuff.
All right.
Well, that's it. I mean, the last slide is just reiterating the links, and then I also have my
Yeah.
email if people want to reach out to me directly.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's any last questions or anything.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? I know you can use the Q&A function or the comments.
I see when we do have someone in the audience who's raised their hand who I think they want to turn their audio on and ask a question.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Let's see here. Can you unmute them?
Yeah, no, is she there? Oh, she's now. But she did have her hand raised. Maddie, if you want to come back up, let us know. Just raise your hand again.
We have another question that came in. What are some of the actionable items from this report?
There's a lot of actionable items, so I don't know where to start, but
right.
in the report, we have items for managers, for companies. One thing that we emphasize the company action items only because there's been a lot of onus on women to change something, but
Mhm.
they have the best intentions and you can do everything in your power. You can be a go-getter, but if the system in place, like the company systems, the culture, the leadership is not there to support you, then you might be hitting a wall. So a lot of our actions are centered on companies, but if you just go to leader.org, we have all types of resources as far as leadership, communication, just all types of resources. So I would also just check out our broader site if you're looking to just empower yourself and see what can I do. But we think it's very important to make sure that companies realize like it's on you to make this better for everybody.
So we have a question by Monica McIntyre. Hi, Monica. She says, I'm fortunate to be on the diversity team for recruitment. Yes, start with community colleges and VCWN. However, outside of sharing the data you provided, where should I start?
Where should you start for what?
I think she's wanting to know what any other areas that she should start in terms of expanding on diversity recruitment initiatives for her company.
Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives out there. There's a lot of consulting firms that really do the work. For example, at Lean In, we went through a decolonizing feminism training. We've been in it for over a year, and it was really interesting because our work is in the women's space, but there's a lot of decolonization that we had to do as far as who we prioritize, even our relationships with each other as a team, maybe the different power dynamics, not just by a hierarchical level, but also racially, how that impacts, how we communicate with each other, how we interact with each other, and how that also translates into the work. And so I don't have any specific resources for you, although we do have at leanin.org, we have an anti-racism library that not only has articles that you can read, but we also have organizations, initiatives, and other resources that you can use if you're trying to bring that to your company. And then I would also say, look out for our allyship program. We'll make sure to let this group know when it's live. We've worked with the most incredible people of all backgrounds, identities, expertise, lived experience, academic experience, consulting experience to just start that conversation and get everybody on the same page. So that's what I would recommend, but it is a hot topic. So there's a lot of people who want to help. And sometimes I find that bringing an outside person after you're done being on the loudspeaker at your company for so long, sometimes just bringing in somebody else to say the same things that you've been saying will actually get you further along. So yeah.
What does the word or the term decolonization mean? I've heard that phrase pop up a couple of times, probably within the last week, but what does that mean in regards to a corporate standpoint, or how does Lean use it?
Yeah, so this was through our consultants who introduced us to this idea. Basically, the premise is that we live in a white supremacist world, and that also impacts the norms, the workplace norms that people function under. So for example, having a sense of urgency, everything is on fire, you need to be on 24/7. Perfectionism, worship of the written word. That's one thing that we struggled with because we love, we want to find the right word. Nothing goes out without a couple of drafts. And so kind of putting shining a light on things that we take for granted, things that are just, this is what it is to be in a workplace. And asking the question, like, does it have to be this way? Where did this come from? What are some alternative ways to approach this work? If you think about, for example, like sense of urgency, everything has to happen. You have to be on 24/7, according to who, to meet whose needs, for what deadlines. So it's just been a really interesting experience of just challenging, first of all, recognizing what we're doing, because if it's just second nature, you don't think about it. So having certain things highlighted, it's like, oh, wow, that is very true. We do that. Understanding them in the context of white supremacy was very interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. And then figuring out alternative modes of working. And so that's just the journey that we've been on for over a year. It's still ongoing. We're still learning. Again, this is not overnight work. But it's the great thing about it is that we have shared language. So if you see something, I can be like, oh, this is that. And everybody knows what you're talking about. It's not like, oh, Pam is the one who has an issue. It's like, we remember that we established that this is something that we're all working on together.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that answer. Yeah, it was just, I was like, oh, what does this decolonization mean? Like, I might have to use it once I figure out how to best use it somehow. All right, ladies, any last questions? I'm seeing a lot of great webinar. Thanks for the information. So thank you so much, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you. I get a little nervous sometimes because I haven't been in the workplace that long. I don't have like 25 years of experience. So sometimes I'm just like, who am I to talk to anybody about this stuff? But, I work for a great org. I'm privileged enough to have really close access to this information. And my whole mission is just to get it out there. So I really appreciate it. And I'm glad people got value from this.
Yeah, we thank you so much. It doesn't matter if you haven't been in the workplace for a long time either, neither have I. But we know that you're the subject matter expert here. And like you said, you have access to the information. And so anytime that we can, right, anytime that we can share with our members. We want to make sure we do that in the most authentic way. So thank you very much.
They're asking for Pam to share her contact information one more time. So
Yeah, the chat.
in the chat. And here,
Okay.
I know that we had a lot of women that were trying to get into this webinar tonight. Even
We
as
did.
and I know that if we capped, unfortunately it was capped at a certain amount, and so I think we know better now that we need to increase that next time. So because we had a lot of women who were not able to get into the webinar, we definitely will make sure that the replay will be available for everyone. And I know for the ones who are on here, you're like, okay, I'm in. So
Right.
who were not able to get in, because I've been getting text messages and Facebook messages, and the whole time, if you see me distracted, because I've been like keep getting pinged.
I have two.
Trying to answer like, okay, it's gonna be a replay, so we will put the replay out for everyone. Hopefully, we can have Pam back. This has been absolutely amazing information. We have such a large group of women within our organization nationwide that I think we know better now not to do a cap anymore because we're going to hear about it now. So we'll make sure we do it again. But we definitely want to thank Pamela for being a part of the Elevating Conversations tonight.
Yes, thank you so much.
And we definitely want to make sure we stay in contact with her. Makita, Pamela, I'll let you guys close out, and then, but Pamela, we definitely want to bring you back real soon.
Yes, we definitely do. Well, ladies, thank you so much. As far as the literary circle, we are, just like this report was very short, we're going to have a very short book for the month of March. The book is called Bed of Roses, Thorns Included by Deanna Carter, who was also on the calls or on this webinar. So thank you so much. She is a philanthropist. I work with her at a Fortune 300 company. I know she's worked on the multi-billion-dollar projects, so I'm really excited to share her works and her book with you guys. And then next quarter from April, May, and June, we are going to be reading Carla Harris's Expect to Win. So that one is going to take up the entire quarter. It's pretty hefty, but I know that we will learn a lot and we'll dig in. So ladies, you guys can go to our career collaborative and you'll be able to find the links to purchase both books. And I'll also type in some notes. But yeah, that's it. Pamela, any last words for you?
Just thank you. I hope this is just the beginning of our collaboration and partnership. And thank you to everyone who attended. I dropped my email in the chat. I'll also add it to the LinkedIn event as well if people are looking to reach out to me to get more of this information. But we got to stick together. We got to continue sharing this information and supporting each other. And yeah, I'm rooting for everybody in attendance and the writer network. We are powerful. Our voices are super valuable for these companies. They're lucky to have us. And we should always remember that.
Amen.
Absolutely. So I will leave you all with this here. The life God gave you is larger than the life you've been living, which means God gives us all special gifts and talents. It's our job to discover what those are and to use those to work in your purpose. Remember who you are and that you are worth it. And just remember that you have people out here, women like us, who are here to support you in your career development, your growth, and you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. So we really enjoyed it. We really like the fact that you were here with us tonight. Please, we'll send the replay out later on tonight. Please watch that. You know how to get a hold of Pamela. You know how to get a hold of us here at BCWN. And thank you so much for watching tonight. Have a good rest of your work week.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.